Live from the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in beautiful downtown Raleigh, it's the Science Cafe with your host, Chris Smith.
All right, everybody. Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome. Yeah, let's get this thing started up. Good evening, everybody. Happy Thursday, and welcome to the Science Cafe. I'm your host. My name is Chris. Here at the museum, I'm curator for the Daily Planet Theater. That's my day job. This is my night job, getting to host this cool show, which the Science Cafe is the best place to be on a Thursday night, especially if you like science and nature, and you're anywhere near the Triangle at all, because every Thursday night, almost all year long, we bring exciting people on stage to share their passion and knowledge with you, and then we flip it and you get to ask questions of our experts. We have a great time, we have great discussions, and if you've been to more than one of them, probably you know we always learn something cool, new, and exciting at the Science Cafe. And, oh, I should say, Happy New Year. This is the first Science Cafe of 2020. So Katie and I haven't, Katie Amon worked very hard. There are several weeks of Science Cafes planned out. We've got about the first 6 months set in the Science Cafe. So you can hit up naturalsciences.org, see what's coming up through the first half of 2020. Go ahead, mark your calendars for the ones that you know you'll want to be here for. But really, you'll probably want to be here every Thursday night because we're doing cool stuff and talking about interesting topics. Tonight's no different. Many of you, if you've been hanging around the museum at least a little bit, you know Dr. Roland Kays. He's the head of the Biodiversity Research Lab here in the museum. He's a professor over at NC State University. He's an expert mammologist studying mammals and the habitats and environments that they live in. He has a cool new podcast out now that you can download anywhere you like to get your podcasts called Wild Animals. Crazy stories about wild animals told by the people who study them. I think season one is out. Season 2 comes soon. So, go ahead and make a note of that one. You're going to want to check out Roland's new podcast that he hosts. And tonight we're going to be talking about critters that are working their way into your backyard. How many of you have seen Coyote in your own? Yeah, right. In fact, I think Roland just had a paper come out talking about coyote range expansion. Anybody see Washington Post articles about coyotes expanding south? A few, yeah, okay. I think he's going to talk a little bit about that too. So lots of really interesting stuff. What about bears in the Triangle? Yeah, that one sort of makes people a little squirmy. I remember when I was over at Duke University, they sent out an alert to everybody on campus for us to be very cautious because a black bear had been spotted wandering through the campus. Of course, a few of us, like the wildlife people, were like, let's go find it. And then the second email came out and was like, do not go try to find the bear. We didn't see it. I've still not actually seen black bear in North Carolina in the wild, in fact. Just 2 weeks ago, I went out east, because if you didn't know it, they live in the mountains, sure, but we also have black bear that live on the eastern half of the state. I think there's even more bear out east. But I went out there because I wanted to see bears. Still no luck. So I don't know, maybe I want to wander through the museum one day. But let's learn more about these things. Put your hands together and welcome to the Science Cafe stage, Dr. Roland Kays.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone, for coming. It's exciting to come here and talk about two of my favorite mammals to a bunch of my new favorite mammals. I'm going to be talking about coyotes and bears, obviously. I'm going to sort of start broad, think about the coyotes and bears on the big global context, and we'll sort of narrow down until we're to your backyard. At the global point of view, what's I think interesting is that bears are the most abundant large carnivore in the world. So this is a graph from a paper recently in Science that was looking at all the large carnivores. So, I mean, bears, they eat a lot of fruit too, but they're predators. They're in the carnivora. And I don't know exactly what the body size is, but you can see here they've ranked, and you can read some of the names, lions and tigers and other types of bears. And you can see at the top is the bears. And black bears are so common that they didn't even fit on this graph, right? See that little dash? And they're like, actually, there's like 800 to 900,000. If you scale that, if you look at the y-axis there on the bottom, if you scale that bar actually goes all the way to there. That's how much more common black bears are than any other large carnivore in the world. There's a lot of black bears out there. I can't believe Chris hasn't seen one yet. Okay, so this is where they lived originally. So pretty much all over North America, except not in the grassiest areas and not in the desert and not in the true deserts, but they're pretty adaptable throughout this area. And a lot of times when you see this kind of map and they show you the original range and the modern range, it's like tiny, right? But the range today is pretty similar in a lot of these areas. They certainly saw the same fate that a lot of wildlife did in the early 1900s. They were so overhunted that they were driven out of a lot of their areas. They declined. They were driven out of a lot of states. But they have made a great comeback, as you can see. As far as I understand, every single state that has bears has an increasing population of bears. They're increasing pretty much everywhere they live. You can see there's still some parts of the range they haven't claimed, but they're still doing pretty well. And I just thought, okay, fun facts about bears. Many of you guys probably already know about this, so we'll just kind of go right through them. Right, they're mostly herbivorous. They can definitely kill things. They would probably prefer to eat meat, but on average, berries are a lot easier to get, so they eat a lot of berries, a lot of fruit, a lot of acorns. They're sort of 100, 200, 300 pounds. World record is 880 pounds. We'll come back to that guy in a little bit. Lifespan on average, sort of 3 to 4 years. The record is 26, but on average, sort of 3 to 4. Very few make it past 10. They hibernate, right? They're one of these awesome species that when it gets cold, they go to sleep. As you get in their range further and further south, fewer of the animals hibernate. So in North Carolina, still most of them hibernate, but they're maybe not hibernating quite as deep, not quite as long. As you get down to Florida, it sort of becomes less and less. The females actually give birth while they're hibernating, which is crazy, right? So they eat a ton in the fall. They get all the acorns. They get as fat as they can. They crawl into a tree or a cave. They go into a deep, deep sleep. Sometimes they kind of barely wake up, squeeze a couple puppies out, cubs out, I should say, and those cubs nurse while the mom is still, she wakes up a little bit. I think they go out and go to the bathroom every once in a while, but mostly they go back and go back into hibernation. So that's how they survive the cold winters when there's not much food. And I think it's more the food than the cold that they're worried about, right? They don't want to waste all the energy running around, so they just sleep. They have a very good sense of smell. They are one of the best smelling mammals in the world. And in terms of conflict with people, not too much, really, right? If it was worse, there wouldn't be so many, because we'd kill them all. But they don't cause too much trouble. They do attack people every once in a while. They definitely killed people before. If you see a bear on the trail, you have to be careful. But I've seen a lot of bears and I've never been attacked. And I think, none of you have been killed by a bear. Generally, they're generally not too problem. The problems come up sometimes around garbage and sometimes around crops. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we're going to talk about coyotes today, too. Coyotes are mostly carnivorous, but they will also eat fruit. So bears and coyotes are kind of the opposite. They can both eat anything. Coyotes in some places eat quite a lot of fruit, but on average they're predators. Their weight's about 25 pounds, 35 pounds in the east, 25 pounds in the west. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. They can live to 6 to 8 years, but they have really high mortality in the first 2. So if they make it past the first 2, then they're likely to live 6 to 8 years. They also have a very good sense of smell. I think coyotes are the smartest mammal in North America, maybe if you don't include humans. They're really, really smart. And so here's an interesting fact about coyotes. About 40% of their population is transient. So that means they're not territorial holders, but they're looking for that opening. They're just sort of wandering around. This is a very dangerous time for coyotes because they don't know where they're going. They don't have a map. They don't know where the roads are. And if they settle down too long in some other coyote's territory, they're going to get beat up. And so they're kind of on the move all the time. And then if a territory opens, then they try to claim it. And in terms of conflict with people, attacks are also very rare. There are 1, maybe 2 recorded deaths by coyotes, so it's less than bears, but very rare. And occasionally there's some trouble with pets, killing cats or dogs, and potentially livestock if they're not very well cared for. If you sort of keep your livestock fenced in or with some guard dogs or something, it's not too hard to keep the coyotes away. Okay, so there. That's the basics about coyotes and bears. The coyote range is really interesting. This is showing their expansion, how they have colonized the continent over about the last century. Originally, they were only in the west. They were in the open country, the deserts, the grasslands, and we can tell this by looking at museum records, at specimens that we have in museums, looking at fossils, looking at archaeological records where they have coyotes in the archaeological records. That's the red area. Right? And basically, they were never in the forests. The eastern deciduous forest, the Pacific Northwest forest, the tropical rainforest, those are habitats they just didn't use until they did. And that's what you're seeing here. As we cut the forest down, they said, thank you very much, and they walk into the farmland. As we killed the coyotes, the pumas, the jaguars, they said, thanks for killing my enemy, now I'm going to come in. And so they've definitely taken advantage of these changes along the way. And they now cover, they haven't yet colonized Long Island, New York. It's the only sizable chunk of real estate that they haven't yet colonized. There's been a few sighted there, but no recent breeding, but I'm sure that'll happen. That'll change. Now, the other interesting thing about coyotes in some of these areas is they will hybridize with dogs and wolves. And you'll see animals like this. In fact, all of the coyotes in North Carolina have a small amount of dog genes and a small amount of wolf genes. They're mostly coyote, right? It's all mixed up. It's what we call it a hybrid swarm, which sounds scary, but it just means all the genes are mixed up. The coyotes are sort of 80, 90% coyote genes, maybe 5 to 10% wolf genes, 5 to 10% dog genes. We're still learning what these genes do. This animal probably has a dog gene for coat color, right? That's not a normal looking coyote. That's a funny looking coyote. It's probably got happened to have the combination of dog genes that combined. We've done some work looking at the wolf genes, and the wolf genes that the coyotes have, we actually know some of what they do, and they're associated with body size. And so we think that the wolf genes have helped the eastern coyotes evolve into larger animals relatively faster, in an evolutionary sense, than they would have been able to do otherwise. And so that's probably been part of their success, especially in the eastern United States. Now, Chris mentioned we just had a paper come out in the Journal of Mammalogy where we were looking at the Panama part of this expansion today, the last couple years. So we went down right to the edge of where they were, and we ran a bunch of chemotraps to try to really see where they were, because it looks like they're getting really close to South America. And we were interested in how far they got. And here's some pictures we got. And these guys are kind of funny looking too, right? We haven't been able to, I have some DNA samples in a freezer in Panama. We haven't been able to get them into a lab yet to see, but look at this tail too. We saw 4 different animals that had a short tail. Now maybe a jaguar chewed it off, but there is a dog gene for short tails. And so it's possible that they had this kind of short tail. And we have them now right at the edge of South America. There's a part of Panama called the Darien Gap. This is where the intercontinental highway, the Pan American Highway, stops. You cannot drive to South America. It stops there, and that's where we found the coyotes. My colleague Ricardo Moreno, a Panamanian who's running cameras there studying jaguars, got a coyote out of cattle ranch right about where that icon shows. So they are close. They're not yet to South America. What happens when they get there, who knows? Maybe they won't get there. Maybe the jaguars will stop them. But it's pretty interesting that they're right at the edge of an entire new continent. And I'm not betting against them, that's for sure. Okay, so that's kind of the global picture for coyotes and bears. Let's zoom in a little bit more and see what's going on with them in North Carolina, in the local region. This shows the change in bear range since 1971. This is a map from the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, and you can see if you go from green to blue to brown to pink, that's over time how they've expanded. So again, bears, like pretty much all wildlife in North America, was over-hunted for a long time until we got some proper management. The North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission started putting, seasons and preventing over-hunting, and the population started expanding and recovering. And you can see, so they've always been on the coast, they've always been in the mountains, and they're now using both of those areas more than before. This is a map of bear abundance, relative abundance. How common are they? So, and it kind of looks similar, maybe not too surprising. This is from our camera trap data. So working with citizen science volunteers, maybe some of you in this room have helped us run cameras, sending all the data to us. We have a great database of where these animals live. And with some sort of computer models, we're able to estimate relatively how common bears are. And so this is what that looks like. And so, bears in the Piedmont, not too many. The Wildlife Commission breaks up the state into these 3 zones in terms of bears, and they allow hunting actually in all the zones, but they kind of manage them differently. And they record, this is how many bears have been hunted in the state over time, east, west, and then the red line is showing total. And you can see it's going up. It's been going up for a long time. So this is how many are hunted by bear hunters. This is their estimate of total population size. Sorry, I don't have this going up to today, but it's continued to go up since what does this go to, 2007, I think. So it's continued to go up. So clearly the bears in North Carolina are increasing. There's a lot in the mountains. There's a lot in the coast. There's a few in the Piedmont, not very many. But there are some, and we'll talk about them a little bit more. Some of these bears on the coast are really fat. So these are some pictures from camera traps that we've run of some bad. I mean, look at that guy. He's got rolls of fat on him. And this other guy, doesn't even really have a neck. He looks like a gummy bear. And none of these is the world record bear, but the world record bear is from eastern North Carolina, 880 pounds. So bear hunting is an important part of the economy in some of these counties in eastern North Carolina, and important part of the culture. And they have a lot of big bears. Why are they so fat? Well, here's the diet of eastern North Carolina bears. That top line is corn. This is from looking at their scats. And so you can see, they're eating some other vegetation, some soft mass, some vegetation. They're killing some things every once in a while, but they're eating a lot of corn. They're eating some peanuts. They're eating whatever crops are out there. And there seems to be a lot of tolerance for that. So if you're a hunter in North Carolina and a bear's eating your corn and you don't like that, you can go shoot that bear. You have permission to do that. You need to file. You need to tell the state that you've done it, that you had a grievance. And despite that fact, we still have a lot of bears. They're really fat, and they're eating a lot of corn. So bears also will eat deer, especially the fawns. So here is a bear attacking. What is he attacking? You sure it's a fawn? This was a project we did with fawn decoys. That's an inflatable fawn, and we fooled the bear just like we fooled you guys. We put this little inflatable fawn there. We wanted to see what would attack a fawn. So when fawns are first born, they don't move. They just sit there. Their strategy is to hide. For about 2 weeks, they just sit there. They're really vulnerable. They basically can't run away, right? If something finds them, they're dead meat. And so we wanted to see what would be finding these animals. And we totally fooled these bears. Here you can see them grabbing at these fawns. They're inflatable. We got a patch kit because we had to keep patching them. Some of these fawns died many, many times. over the time that we had them out there. And so this is cool because now we're able to look at what are the predators of fawns, and it's pretty much whatever finds them first. And this is what we found in eastern North Carolina. Black bears were number one. The highest percentage of our fake fawns that got killed were killed by black bears. And then you can see some coyotes, some bobcats, some gray fox. The black vultures were a little bit surprising, but they are known to kill calves. So ranchers that have cattle have problems sometimes when they're calving. The black vultures will come in and they'll actually kill the calves. And so from that standpoint, maybe it's not super surprising. But it's interesting because if you would have studied fawn mortality from another perspective, like maybe you put a radio call on a fawn, you saw it was dead, you walked in there and a vulture flew away, you'd be like, oh, the scavengers are here. But now we can see, no, that was the first guy there, and it jumped on this animal and tried to chew on it. Okay, so what about coyotes in North Carolina? This is just kind of a zoomed in of our map. You can see they kind of got here in the 90s. They kind of got here from all directions, right? From the west, well, mostly from the west, from the south a little bit, from the north a little bit, and all of a sudden they were in the entire state. And they are now. How many coyotes are in the state? We have no idea. There's no study that's tried to estimate it. The Wildlife Resource Commission estimates that hunters killed 50,000 coyotes last year. So, and they do that every year. The year before it was like 47,000. And so the next year, so there's a lot of coyotes out there. They're not obviously putting a dent in the coyote population, but this is just hunters telling the Resource Commission how many coyotes they remember killing in the last year. So it's probably not very accurate, but maybe it gives us a scale of that there's a lot of coyotes out there. We get them on our camera traps all over the place. This is a map. All the gray dots are places that we ran a camera and didn't get a coyote. All the green dots are where we did get a coyote. So they're all over the state. This is our abundance map. We can take those data from the cameras, run some models, and try to predict where they're most common and most abundant. It's really patchworky, right? There's different things, different habitat in different places, the forests, the cities. But you can see that black dot. So the black dots are the bigger cities. So you can find Raleigh there, and there's lots of coyotes right around here. Our volunteers, you guys helped us run cameras all throughout Raleigh. In the suburban area, we ran them on campus. We got like 5 coyotes on campus. We ran them in North Raleigh, suburbs, in the exurbs, in the rural areas, all these different areas. And we saw, okay, I was sure there was going to be few coyotes in the urban areas, more in suburban, more in exurban, and more in the rural. And it turns out, oh, I'm skipping ahead. Sorry. Oh, I'll come back to that slide in a second. Anyway, just to tell you the result was they were the same everywhere. The same. They don't care, city, rural, countryside. It's things like green space, and it's things like prey that they're concerned about. And I've got a graph to show that later. Sorry, I skipped ahead. What is next? Let's talk about coyote size. This is a cool paper recently that looked at body size of coyotes from the southeast, the northeast, and the western United States. And so you can see their males are a little bit bigger than females, but it's pretty similar. And then the gray, that's west, they're smaller. The southeast, that's white, they're a little bit bigger. And the northeast are the biggest. The northeast also tend to have more wolf genes, so we think that's part of it. And you can see on the y-axis on the left there, I've got body mass in kilograms, and I've drawn a couple lines over there showing you where the pounds are, right? So basically, in this region, they're on average 30 pounds. In the east, they're a little bit bigger. Maybe they're 35. In the west, they're more like 25. Maximum weight in these areas, in the east, it's, I don't have a line drawn, but it's something around 40, 45 pounds is max size in the southeast. In the northeast, they can peak out just barely over 50 pounds, but very few animals. So there's still, I hear people all the time are like, I saw a coyote that was 80 pounds, and I know because I have a German Shepherd, and he's that size, and I can tell them, and no. They just look big. They're not that big. When you get them on a scale and you weigh them, they're just not that big. They just look big. What do coyotes eat? Here's 3 studies that I found to show you some examples. Like I said, they eat all kinds of different stuff, right? They eat deer, they eat rabbits, they eat small mammals, they eat fruit, they eat insects, and you don't have to worry about the details of which pie slice is where. The point is, it's variable. One place to the other, they might be, and I bet if you go back another year to the Piedmont, it'll be different, right? They're eating whatever is easiest. If it's a good rabbit year, they're taking the rabbits. If there's tons of deer, they're going to eat a lot of fawns and sick deer. Like, they're not very good at hunting deer. They can hunt deer. They're not very good at it. So they're taking the easy stuff, right? There's a bunch of sick deer. Boom, they'll go for that. In Fort Bragg, there's a bunch of insects and persimmons. They gorge themselves on that. So whatever is most common, that's what they go for. They're very adaptable in that way. And they have the nose to find it. I think that's really important. Okay, so finally we'll zoom in locally to the Triangle area. What do we know about these animals really, really close by? Again, the bears are not that common in this area. The state has this Piedmont area as a separate bear management zone. This is showing you each county and how many times a bear has been recorded in that county. You guys can probably read it, but I can't tell exactly the years. From 1992 to 2010, you can read, you can see. So they show up here every once in a while, right? They wander in. Maybe there's some breeding animals right at the edge. The State Game Commission would be happy if the bears stayed out of this area. They don't want the headaches that you people and your friends and your neighbors and everybody else is going to cause with bears. So this is what they say. I'm going to have to go over here to read this. They're calling this, they want this to be a limited bear population zone, that the occupied bear range, that they expand, they do not want the bears to expand into this area. They think it's going to result in more bear-car collisions, more bear-human interactions around these urbanized areas, and also most of the way they control, right? There's no predators of bears around here except humans. So bear hunting is what's maybe somewhat, but not enough, limiting the populations in the coast and the mountains. It's going to be harder to do that in this Piedmont area. But, you know, so they do show up. I remember a couple years ago when one wandered through the 5 Points area in Raleigh. Has anybody seen a bear in the last couple years or heard about one? Where was it? Where? Okay, in Pocosin. Okay, so that's a little further away. Okay, so, but, you know, interesting, Asheville, North Carolina has a lot of bears. And so it's interesting, you know, so the state's like, oh, we don't want bears because bears and people don't get along. And Asheville is actually working out okay. And I think it's as much the people as the bears. It's both. It's both the people and the bears. And there's a really cool research project done by NC State, ongoing in North Carolina, in Asheville, looking at bears. And, you know, the people are like, oh, there's a bear, you know, getting your garbage. Like, oh, that bear, you know. Yeah, he's back. And they like him. People like bears. So this is a kind of a fun figure. We call this a mood meter. And we use this to ask people what they would think if they saw a bear near their house. How would they feel? And so if you look, it's kind of green. Green. Let me read this off. Green is relaxed, serene, fulfilled, calm. Blue is sort of hopeless, drained, disappointed, sad. Red is enraged, tense, frightened, annoyed. And yellow is, you know, hopeful, happy, ecstatic. And so this is just an iPad, and people could point. If you saw a bear, how would you feel? And they would look and they would point at where they feel. So you can see bears. Yeah, people like bears. It makes them feel happy. You know, a few of them were tense. A few of them were nervous. But generally positive feelings. So we asked the same thing about coyotes. A little bit more mixed, you know. There's still a lot of people that would be happy to see coyotes. I would be happy. I would be a yellow guy. But there's definitely a lot more variation, which is interesting given that, you know, bears, technically speaking, are more dangerous than coyotes. But there's just a different perspective, right? Coyotes, some people see coyotes as villains or evil or mean or something like that. So anyway, I thought this was kind of an interesting thing to show. This is North Carolina citizens, 239 people, poking at our iPad, telling us what they would think about bears and coyotes. So I showed you this graph earlier. So you can see, again, there's plenty of coyotes around. Here's that graph I wanted to show you about what proportion of them are in suburban, exurban, rural, or wild. We did this in D.C. and in Raleigh and got similar results in both of those places. So this is one of the things that can happen with coyotes. This was a picture we got this May in Duke Forest. We were doing a camera trap survey in Duke Forest, just a random camera out there in the forest. It's a coyote carrying a cat, cat's dead. So this is definitely something that happens. Coyotes will kill cats. This is one of the many reasons you probably shouldn't let your cat outdoors, because coyotes are pretty much all over the place. Cats on dogs are rare, but they do happen in North Carolina. This is a news story recently from Wake County where a small dog, they're always small dogs. There was a study, a really cool study, that looked at YouTube videos of coyotes and dogs interacting. Like, that was their data collection, to watch a bunch of YouTube videos. Like, that's cool. That's smart. And they wrote this paper, and the small dog, because, everyone's got these little Ring video phones, or the cameras in their yard. They're getting this stuff. I see it online all the time. The small dogs are definitely going for it. The Chihuahuas, coyotes do not like Chihuahuas. If you own a Chihuahua and you might have coyotes in your yard, seriously, don't let it out if you don't have a fence. The coyotes are killing them. They really are. They really don't like the little yippy dogs. The bigger dogs, not really much of a problem. They find this great videos of them playing with each other. Sometimes it seems like the big dogs will chase the coyotes, and they get out of view of the people, and then they can potentially have problems. This is the solution. I've seen these for sale for a couple years. I thought they were pretty great. I saw earlier this year the first news story of a dog actually being saved by this. There was an older woman who had a dog. She liked to hang out in her garage and let her small dog walk around. She put this vest on. The coyote came up. It grabbed the dog. It let it go and ran away. And she ran up and was able to save it. And so if you have a Chihuahua, and you'll want to let it out without a fence, you might think of that. So that's the end of my talk and the end of this bear. Hopefully we've got some time for questions if you guys have any questions. Thank you very much.
Let's give Roland a round of applause. All right. Yeah, we've got lots of time for questions. Thanks, Roland.
Sure.
So the way it works, if you have a question, wave at me or wave at Katie there. We've got microphones that we'll pass around the room. We've got lots of time to have a great discussion about the topic. If we're not getting to you, just keep waving, because we have to move the microphones around. Do me a favor, though. Wait till we bring a microphone to you. Don't yell out questions or things like that, because we want everyone in the room to be able to hear. So, Katie's got the first one.
Well, thank you for the talk. I love the work that you do.
Thanks.
We have had a coyote in the backyard. It was years ago, so don't anybody get upset. And it looked very sickly. And I was wondering and it was acting odd. So I was wondering what the instance of rabies is in the population.
Sure. So rabies is relatively rare. Very, very rare. It does happen from time to time. Pretty much anytime you see an animal, raccoon, coyote, fox, out during the daytime and acting strangely, then you could be concerned. If you just see it out during the daytime, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Raccoons are out during the daytime. We get them on our camera trap. Not a lot, but we get them on the camera trap. They come out during the daytime. So just a daytime coyote or a daytime raccoon is not a reason to be concerned about rabies. But you can tell if they're sick, right? They're running around funny, they're acting funny, foaming at the mouth, all those kinds of things. So then you definitely want to be careful. And if you see an animal you think is rabid, it is good to sound the alarm a little bit, right? Because you don't want that animal to surprise one of your neighbors and actually, have a chance to bite them. In this area, rabies is much more common in raccoons than in coyotes. There's a certain strain that is worse in raccoons. And I don't know if the coyotes get it and just die right away, so they don't have a chance to spread it. I'm not sure exactly what the deal is. But it is relatively rare. When I monitor the coyote news, I get a Google alert whenever coyotes make the news, which is every day basically. And so I see whenever they attack people, and I haven't done the math, but I would guess maybe a quarter of those times it's a rabid raccoon, coyote in the country. So it's not very often, but every once in a while it does happen. Mange is another disease that coyotes can get, and that's where they lose their hair. Sometimes coyotes that lose all their hair, people call them chupacabras. They think they look like chupacabras. They do look funny. There's some indication, not from our area, but there is a study in Alberta where it's very cold, and if you lose your hair, you're going to be screwed, that the coyotes that got mange hung around houses more. And so, maybe looking for the sort of the easy food.
Black bears like honey and they like beehives. I'm a beekeeper.
Oh, yeah.
We have to strap them down in the fall when they're coming through. And coyotes do like chickens. I do not let my chickens out anymore. I've seen them come in at full force, full running, and just grab the chicken and never slow up.
In daylight?
In daylight.
So how do you keep bees from a bear?
You strap the hive together with a strap.
And they can't get at it?
No, they just knock it around. They don't knock the hive apart.
Oh, and then the bees attack the bear.
No.
They don't.
They attack, but the
Bear
bears
doesn't
don't
care.
care.
Jeez.
You can they sting them all right in the face, and they just don't care.
And that's enough. They can't get in.
No, if you got them strapped all together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Strapped to the stand.
Yeah. Yeah. Because bears. Everyone knows bears like honey, right? But I would not want to be a beekeeper in bear country. Bird feeders are another thing that people who have bird feeders in bear country sometimes have to stop having bird feeders because the bears will just keep taking it down over and over. We run these camera traps, which are plastic cameras stuck on a tree, and the bears destroy those. I'm like, why? There's no honey in there. There's nothing in there. Maybe they see the strap. Maybe it's your fault. Maybe they see the strap, and they're like, oh, a strap must be something good inside, and they try to get in. I'm like, come on, leave our cameras alone.
We would like to know, what should we do if we find a dead bear in the Piedmont area, or a dead coyote, or even worse, an injured one?
Yeah, okay, good question. So I think the Wildlife Resource Commission would be interested in the bears because they're tracking the bear numbers and they're interested in that. And so there's a phone number you can call. You can look up and call. I'm not sure exactly what it is. But so I think they would be interested in that. Dead coyote, nobody cares. The coyote's mom cares. Otherwise, so sometimes the museum, it depends on sort of what's going on. Sometimes we like to collect these animals and make specimens out of them. We don't have an active coyote project going right now, and we really don't want all of North Carolina bringing us things they find on the road. So we'll hold off for now, but maybe we'll start off later. Good question about the injured ones. What's that? Well, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think there's anyone that's going to help that animal. I don't know that there's anyone that should help that animal. I think it sort of depends exactly what the situation, where it is. If it's out in the woods, just let it go. Let nature take its course. If it's in a really developed area, then maybe there could be trouble if someone doesn't keep an eye on it or try to take care of it. So maybe someone else knows more about animal rehabilitators. Right, there's a network of animal rehabilitators that will, take baby bluebirds and take baby squirrels and take baby possums and stuff like that. But a bear or coyotes, a little bit of a different situation. So they might get mad at me if I were to recommend that. I'm not really sure. If I saw one, I would feel sorry for it and probably just walk away.
I've got someone who might have some insight.
Okay.
Hey everybody, I actually work for the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. I'm here to see what an awesome job Roland's doing talking about this subject matter.
I hope I got everything right.
Yeah, it's great. Great so far. A couple other things I might have added, but so far you covered a
Great,
lot of
good.
stuff.
Go for it. You got the mic.
Just to answer that one question, I don't want to take over everybody's opportunity to ask questions, but when it comes to rehabilitation, with bears and coyotes specifically, just to throw it out there, those are two species that you can't rehabilitate. They're large. Coyotes are not considered to be native to North Carolina. They're incredibly difficult or impossible to rehabilitate without a lot of stress to them. So basically, if you do find an injured bear or coyote, honestly, the best thing to do is leave it alone. Let nature take its course. If it's so bad off that it looks like it's really suffering, a wildlife enforcement officer can put the animal down, but that's really kind of the only hands-on intervention. So, yeah, let nature take its course is always a good option. So.
Thank you. All right, next question. Here we go.
Okay. Seems to me that there are no predators for bears, and is that the reason for their growth in North Carolina?
Well, yeah, so it's true that there really, other than humans, are no predators for bears. But, you know, globally, there are no predators for bears. You know, they're big. So I don't think a wolf, you know, even if we had wolves and mountain lions here, they're not going to mess with the bear very much. Maybe the young, you know, maybe if they caught a cub out on its own, they would. So I think, so that's a little bit of the story. But probably the bigger story is that they were brought down so low due to overhunting, and now that the hunting is managed so that it's not too much, their population is able to expand, and they're able to reclaim the habitat that's great bear habitat that they just weren't in before. So there's more and more space for them, and so that's why their population is increasing.
Notice that people that raise cattle and goats, sometimes they'll have 2 or 3 coyotes, and I've heard stories that 2 or 3 donkeys, and I'd heard that they could kill coyotes. Is that true?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, so if you have goats, there's a variety of ways that you can try to keep coyotes away, and donkeys are one of them. I think donkeys are very smart. They're very alert, so they're a good guard dog kind of thing, right? And they're big enough that a coyote is no threat to them. I would be surprised if a donkey could actually kill a coyote. So I've seen a video of a donkey killing a mountain lion that was completely fabricated. There's a backstory to that. The mountain lion was already dead when the donkey, and they filmed that, and they're like, look how tough my donkey is. And so it's fabricated. So you might know more than I do, but I mean, coyotes are smart, and they're fast, and I would be surprised if a donkey could literally kill a coyote, but could they drive it off? Yes, I think they could. Could they keep them out of the way? That's probably a good strategy. There's a lot of different strategies for keeping coyotes away from livestock, and they all require a little bit of extra work, like having donkeys, having fences, bringing your animals in, things like that. But they all can be effective in a variety of different ways. And actually, they've done some surveys of people who keep livestock in North Carolina, and coyotes are, so far, a relatively minor problem. In some ways, the turkey vulture, the black vultures are a worse problem for some of these people than the coyotes.
Okay, 2 questions. The bear question is there a genetic difference between the eastern black bear and the mountain black bear? And is it right to assume that any bears that appear here are probably coming from the east? And the coyote question is, are they susceptible to distemper?
They are susceptible to distemper. That's an easy one. Distemper is a disease that a variety of carnivores and canids in particular can get. Foxes, skunks can also get it, and dogs can get it. And I don't think it's a big deal in North Carolina at the moment, but it can kind of raise up and go down, and so coyotes can be part of that. I don't know about I don't think there's any big genetic difference between east to west. I haven't seen anything. If it was big, I probably would have seen it. Maybe there's some minor differences between them. The bears that are coming in, the closest bear populations are to the east or to the north. So Virginia is not that far away, and they also have bears in the state not too far from us, and so they tend to be coming back, coming in from those directions. Would be the ones that be closest to Raleigh. But they're also kind of coming in, but you know, to the west, there's more cities that they would sort of have to work their way through.
So my question is, if bears and coyotes can smell so well, why were they attracted to your plastic fawn?
Well, because we had a very small amount of fawn urine there as well. Oh. We didn't want to like really lure them in, but we wanted to add to that. And you know, a fawn's going to be sitting in basically the same place for a couple weeks, and so there's going to be a little bit of fawn urine. We were rather careful about not having it just be a little bit, but we just wanted to kind of add to that because otherwise we were afraid we wouldn't trick them if we did that. So yeah, and what we found was we ran the camera for 2 weeks without the fawn, and then we put the fawn there, and we didn't find a huge change in the number of bears that were there. So we were comfortable that we weren't luring them in from miles away by the fawn. Good question, though.
You mentioned that the coyotes almost made it to South America. Are they found on any other continent?
Good question. No. So far, no. The original range was the red area of that map, which was western United States, grasslands, open country, and they have expanded east, and so they've expanded north to Alaska, which is the expansion we know the least about, actually, and south. There was, I make this joke sometimes, there's this famous picture of a coyote on the airport tram to the Portland, Oregon airport. And I was like, if they ever can figure out how to get on an airplane, then the rest of the world is going to take over. But what's interesting, actually, is there's another species in the same genus. So they're genus Canis, right? So that's the same genus as wolves, Canis lupus. And the golden jackal is a Canis. And you think about jackals in Africa, they're also in Asia and Europe, and they've been spreading in Europe quite a bit. So basically, the golden jackal, it's not quite the European coyote, but it might be going in that direction. And they have spread over quite a bit of area. It seems to be a couple animals. Like all of a sudden, there'll be one in Holland, and there's like none between like Czechoslovakia and Holland. So it's like, how did it get there? They seem to be these sort of long distance dispersers, but they're definitely expanding their range and adapting. Life evolves, life adapts, and these canids, wolves too, wolves, coyotes, jackals, they're very adaptable, they're very flexible, and they're figuring out how to live with people more and more in all these different places.
Hi, so I'm from Asheville, so I've grown up seeing bears in my backyard, and I remember in elementary and middle school, there being programs at school with us being encouraged to like strap down our trash cans or not have bird feeders. But I've noticed more bears in recent years, but then there being less of a big deal about the bears being there. Do you think that's just because we've gotten more used to bears being in the city, or if it's less of a concern to keep the populations like away from the city just because there's so many bears that it's not an issue?
Yeah, so good question. So I don't know the details of the population of bears in Asheville, if it's increasing. It certainly isn't decreasing. It's either stable or increasing. And they are, so Nick Gould is a PhD student who just finished, and he's the one who led that project that I showed. And he has bears denning, right in people's backyards, sometimes under their houses, really close to people. And they're definitely eating a lot of human food. They definitely want to work towards them eating less human food. There hasn't been a whole lot of conflict so far. There hasn't been anyone killed or something like that, but there could be, right? I mean, these are big, giant, dangerous animals that are unpredictable. You never know. You get enough people, enough bears together, something bad's going to happen eventually. So they're actually starting a new project. It's called Bearwise or something like that, where they're working to try to change human behavior to reduce the bears' access to garbage, to try to start to sort of put a limit on that and try to see if they can change the bears' behavior and maybe cut off the risk of future interactions with people. Yeah.
Yeah, so you spoke about how diverse the genetics are for coyotes. Is there any talk about multiple species, or is it just like humans, we're so diverse, we're going to stay one species?
Yeah, good question. So because the coyotes have hybridized with wolves and dogs, they're this genetic mix of genes, right? And that's diversity, and that's what evolution acts on, right? Some of those variations are going to do great. Some of them are going to do terrible. They're going to die away. The ones that do great are going to breed and be the next generation. And that's exactly what's happened. That's what's colonized the East Coast. And potentially, that could turn into a different species. But the key thing you need for that we don't have so far is some kind of isolation, some kind of separation, right? Right now, coyotes are really good dispersers. They can go hundreds of miles at a time. And so all the genes are still getting mixed up. And so there's no separation. We do see there tends to be, more wolf genes in the Northeast and some dog genes here and some, so there are some patterns, but it's all kind of continual variation. And from an evolutionary point of view, it's all still getting all mixed up. And so how it will all settle out, if it will ever settle out, we'll see. But it's definitely all coyotes. At some point we might say, well, there's a different subspecies or something like that. But because there's so much gene flow, there's still so much mixing that there's definitely no difference, different species. Some people have said, oh, we should call the coyote in the Northeast the coy wolf. And I was like, no, that's terrible. It's a terrible idea because, first of all, it's not half wolf, which is what that name implies, right? It's only got like 5% wolf. And it's got 5% dog, and we're ignoring that, so it would be coy wolf dog. But it's mostly coyote, and it's not different. It's not, a different species. There's continual gene flow. It's still a dynamic situation. Yeah.
So my question was, how much social interaction do bears have with one another versus being loners? Like, obviously there's a mother and her cub, but once the cubs grow up, do they maintain contact with their mom or their sisters or like neighboring bears that are nearby all the time? Not very much. Not the way. So coyotes are more social. They live in packs, although they tend to run around, but they tend to come together. Bears are definitely more loners. They are so one of the things about animal societies, like why are some animals in groups and other animals are solitary? Usually the answer to that question is predators, right? If you have risk of a predator, a group will help you defend against that predator, help you see that predator, help you escape from that predator. The problem with groups is they compete for food. And so, if there's 5 bears in a cherry tree, they're going to strip that cherry tree really fast, and there's no advantage to them to having a group size because they really don't have any predators. And so bears are, for the most part, solitary because they don't want to compete for food, and then the males are going to be especially mean to each other because they want to, they want to have access to the females as well. Yep. Who's next? Okay.
When you cite examples of how heavy the maximum bear was, or even how much mix of wolf and dog, do you get that data from dead roadkill, or do you catch and release, or what do scientists do to get that data?
So because bears and coyotes are both hunted, there's no shortage of dead animals to get your hands on if you're doing a project where you want to get dead animals. And so here at the museum, we have a lot of dead animals here, right? We have a big collection of animals, of specimens, skulls, and skeletons. Everything we archive now, we also have a frozen tissue sample in a vial in an ultra-cold -80 freezer down in the basement of the museum. And so when I was building up my coyote collection for the research, I didn't go out with a gun, right? I got on the phone and found a bunch of coyote hunters and was like, hey, could I come by and pick up some animals? They were already killing them. And so for both of these species, whenever you want to do this kind of research, we team with the Wildlife Resource Commission or the similar agency in other states, and we, through them, talk to hunters. The hunters love to have their stuff, utilized. Sometimes they might be selling the fur. You'll take the skull and a tissue sample, et cetera. I did some of this work in the Northeast. I've been to some really strange corners of the world. The one guy, it was in New Hampshire on the border of Maine, way up in northern New Hampshire, and he was like, yeah, I kill like 30 coyotes a year. And I was like, great, can you throw them in a snowbank? So he did. So we show up there one spring, it's starting to melt, there's sort of mud everywhere. He had his sugar shack going, so there's all this smoke coming out because he's boiling sap, making maple syrup. Just randomly, there's this cow head sitting there. He'd harvested, he butchered a cow. And there's this big snowbank, and we went there with shovels and dug out 30 coyotes and got our specimens for the museum. So that's how I got to see some strange corners of the world for the coyote research. You guys are all eating. Sorry. Maybe you're done by now.
You mentioned coyotes in packs. Do they hunt in packs, or do they hunt lone, or is it a combination?
So that's a really good question. You think about like wolves are these pack hunters, cooperatively hunting, We just don't see that in coyotes. And so this has been studied a lot in the West, right? You can sit in Yellowstone and with your scope, and you can see the wolves doing their they're hunting, and you see the coyotes are not doing that. In the east, that's harder to do because there's too many trees. You can't see what's going on as well. So we don't have the same data, same quality data. But we have camera traps, and most of our camera traps are single animals. Sometimes we get pairs. We get pairs reasonably. We very rarely get more than that. The best data from this, what I would love to do would be to GPS collar and track entire packs at the same time to really see how they're coordinating their movement. That would be awesome. And there might be some more subtle coordination that we're not picking up that we would see with that. The best study to date was a study, I think it was in Nova Scotia. It was somewhere in eastern Canada, and it was snow tracking. So this is cool, right? Because now you can see how many animals are moving together, and you can see when they made a kill. And they found that animals did not cooperatively group hunt. Sometimes there'd be a pair, right, and they would hunt, but they were not more successful in pairs than in groups. And you run into what we were talking about with the bears earlier, where two coyotes kill a rabbit. Now each coyote only has half the rabbit. Which doesn't work very well. Which is interesting because I said earlier, they're not very good deer hunters. They're just not big enough. They can kill deer, but mostly they're not. But if they were to start cooperatively hunting, then they might be able to really start killing some deer and making a difference on the deer population. So far that hasn't happened, but evolution might find a way eventually.
Are they a matriarchal group or patriarchal? Or,
it is. They talk about the alpha male and female. Basically what it is it's the breeders, right? And the breeders have puppies. And so it's mom and dad and the puppies. And over the next year, those puppies grow up. So they're born in like April. They grow up by the spring. They're sort of teenagers. And then over the winter, some of them might disperse. Some of them might hang out at home. So then the next year, they've got new puppies, and they might have one or two of the teenagers hanging out from the year before. Those animals might help a little bit at the den by bringing food, but not very much. Nothing like the wolves. They're not nearly as helpful. And if a territory opens up, boom, they're gone. They're gone right away. So that's the group structure. It's mostly a family. It's the parents and the kids of this coming year. Sometimes they have some teenagers hanging around, but I don't think I've ever heard of teenagers hanging around for more than 1 year. So they might hang around for their first year, but by the second year, they're off wandering around looking for their own territory.
In terms of size and weight, how do large North Carolina black bears from the East Coast compare with large polar bears?
Oh, geez. Sorry. Let me look up the weight of a polar bear. They are smaller. Polar bears are the largest terrestrial predator. And I will tell you here, I wrote a field guide called The Mammals of North America. It's available in app form. Here you go. If you need to look up the weight of a polar bear really quick, it's a good authoritative way, and I can tell you, it's in kilograms, sorry. 800 kilos times 2.2 is the record size that I have for a male polar bear. So still way, way, way bigger than an 880-pound black bear. Yeah.
How would a novice be able to tell the difference between a fox, a coyote, and a wolf if they're not standing together? I know obviously the size, but
sure.
Just they're 100 yards away. How do I know if it's a coyote or a fox?
Yeah, so we actually do this a lot because we get these black and white camera trap pictures and from all over the world in our camera traps, and we have to identify them often from profile without the color. We do have a category in our software called unknown canid, because sometimes you can tell it's a dog, but you can't tell what it is. So there is the size. There's a certain just shape of the head and that's different that I'm going to have a hard time explaining. If we sat down and looked at some examples, I could say that. A couple giveaways. So there's red fox and gray fox. Red fox have black on their forearms that's really conspicuous, and they usually have a white tail tip. Gray foxes have a black tail tip, usually, and they don't have that black. So when I see a fox-sized thing, they kind of have a similar profile, similar size, and I can't see color, I can usually tell them the difference by the color of the forearms and the color of the tip of the tail. And otherwise, it's a head-shaped thing with a coyote, and the tails. Red foxes often have really bushy, like almost bottle brush sort of tails, super bushy tails that are different than coyotes and gray foxes have.
Let's give Roland one more round of applause.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks for all the great questions. Thanks for the invitation to come up.
Thanks for doing this, Roland. I appreciate it. That was a whole lot for just 1 hour, right? That was great. Thanks so much, Roland. Hey, thanks to all of you for coming out. We'll be back here next Thursday night. Next week's Science Cafe, we're going to have the Director of Conservation for Audubon, North Carolina. We're going to be talking about Audubon's new report on threatened and endangered birds in North America. There's a lot of stuff in there you're going to want to know. If you like birds, right, we did mammals tonight. We'll do birds next week. Come see us again here at the Science Cafe. Good night, everybody.